And
David got that from a single conversation.
I mean, a 3-minute conversation. And my heart just like stopped. And I was just like, fucking soul stories. That's what I've been doing the whole time. And so say what you want about that process with David. Criticize it all you want. But like that validation, that somebody feeding that confidence back to me was just like, what am I doing? I've had this thing in front of me this whole time. I need to go 100%.
Welcome back to another episode of the Loving Creative Podcast. I am your host, Kamga Tchassa, and I'm so glad to have you back on the show. Thank you very much for listening. If you haven't left a review on iTunes yet, this is a good time to just pause and then go there, leave like a rating and a review. Let me know what you think. That would really help encourage me, first of all, and then increase the popularity of the podcast as much. So, and if you want to go a step further, you can always go to Patreon. I have a Patreon page. I have 2 patrons there. You could be the 3rd Patreon or the 4th Patreon and support me on this journey. I really want to do this for the rest of my life. And of course, by now, if you've heard the snippet, you know that I'm talking on this episode with Danny. Danny was present in the previous episode, but I was on his show. I was on the Soul Stories podcast, which I help produce and engineer. And on this episode that you're about to listen to, I talked with Danny about a bunch of things about his life as a creative, really focusing on his journey when he started as an accidental poet to his year of mania and going through really difficult times, as well as his job. His job is really emotionally taxing. You get a chance to listen to him as he describes what he does on a regular basis. And he also gives some tips that I thought you would find really valuable. Tips like how to deal with feedback, how to find a way to create from joy, how he's had support on his journey. It was an all-round enjoyable conversation for both of us. I got a lot of lessons that I learned from it, and I feel that it's a great opportunity for you to delve into the life of a creative, somebody who has a full-time job and then still works on his dreams on the side in the evening. So without much ado, let's get into the episode with Danny Mazur of Soul Stories. Danny,
Hi.
welcome to the Loving Creative Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I mean, I'm putting on my own podcast suit right now to do the thing that you did to me. It's like I was on your podcast, now you're on my podcast. It's like, I was on our podcast and now I am on
Your podcast.
Yeah, so
I am not on your podcast. I am not your engineer.
All right. How did we meet? I think I still remember vividly the first night at the open mic at the Video Cafe, Stained Arts, and then I think I shared some really boring poems that day. But one thing that stuck out for me was how much you carried the room and the energy, and you and Delia. Is it Delia or Dahlia? I keep making
Delia
de la Jeunesse. Wait, no, La Jeunesse.
Delia La Jeunesse.
Yes, of Stained Arts. So we met, struck a chord, had coffee, and then before we realized we're now about to launch the first season of Soul Stories podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So for the 2 people who have no idea who you are, could you tell us a little bit about Danny Mazur?
Yeah. What do you want to know about Danny Mazur?
I want to know what brought Danny into the world of creativity, how his journey has been from the start, from the first idea that he ever had to leave from his brain to the world, to now carrying things like Soul Stories and organizing events like Unpacked and all these wonderful, vulnerable storytelling events that bring people in community. I mean, I've listened to your podcast with Mike. I listened to your podcast with Who Cares? Your friend, what's her name again?
Sloan.
Yeah, Sloan. And I suppose if you want to learn more about you, I should just go there. But what about your creative life most people don't know?
Well, I think something interesting that a lot of people in Denver don't know is that I did not have any sense of creativity until I was like 19 or 20. Growing up, I was all sports. I thought I was going to be a professional baseball player. I thought I was going to be a professional football player. I loved playing basketball. And I didn't really even listen to music until I was like 13 or 14. So I have this weird story where I kind of feel like I'm like a born again creative, like a born again Christian.
Yeah.
Like there was part of me that fulfilled the sports journey. And then in college, I remember discovering poetry for the first time. And I remember just like falling in love with it. And then I would like smoke a bunch of weed and like write. Can I say that on this podcast?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I would like smoke and then I would write. And I remember writing this like really depressing poem. It said something like, the sun does not care if you cry, the moon does not care if you cry, or something. It was like so sad. It was so like sad boy poetry. But I remember being like really proud of that. And I must have been 19 at the time, I think. 19 or 20.
Huh. And what I know with that particular aspect, when I put those pieces together, is like you've done a lot of traveling, both physically and, say, soul-searchingly. Like I attended the event at Unpack where you shared the story about consent, and that's a whole other part you can listen to on the Soul Stories podcast where you can actually get a version of it. And it feels like in your creative journey, you've had to travel a lot, like mentally and physically. And could you trace that journey from when you started doing this sad, quote unquote, poems to now doing these amazing events where you have people sitting in a room and sharing really vulnerable stories? Like, what happened between a 19-year-old sad poem writing Danny and the organizer Danny now?
Yeah. So I went on service trips at that same time I was started writing poetry. And I went on service trips across the country. And I remember after one of them, we were like, hey, we're going to create a community where we do random acts of kindness together as college kids. And it was called Agape. And I always like to say that was my first version of Soul Stories. So
what year was that?
That was 2011 or 12, one of those years. And I didn't put much effort into it. It was successful for a moment, and then it bottomed out after a few months. But at that same time, I started writing poetry and also bringing people together. And so those were like kind of these outlets that were split off. And then I came to Denver, and a big part of my story that I usually lead with is that after college, you know, I thought I was going to be a professional youth worker. I thought I may be a teacher. I thought I may be a social worker or a therapist. Those were my tracks that I was like, thought I was going to be involved in. And so I move over here to work with kids, and right before it, I was like, you know what? Like, I know deep in my heart that I want to be like an entrepreneur, or I want to be a creator. I want to create something. And like, I kind of always knew that. It was always like eating at me. And so I was writing a lot of poems at the time, not sure. Like, I thought I might create something to help kids. I move over here. My mom overdoses on painkillers. And so I'm like totally distraught. And then I'm working 50 hours a week in schools. I'm like drinking and smoking, trying to get with women, distracting myself as much as I possibly can. My friend comes down with a serious mental health disease. And I remember like this is like kind of a year of mania for me. Like I'm so out of my head, and I'm so like, like moment to moment, impulse to impulse. I'm not even really centered. I remember going to bed and writing poetry and like writing about my brain feeling like it was like cooking in an oven was a metaphor I used in one of my poems, because it was so intensely anxious and depressed and scared. And at the same time, I'm like, I need to create something. Like, what is it? This is actually something I've never told anybody before, is that at the same time that this is happening, I'm having this incredible impulse. And by incredible, I just mean like an intense impulse to like, what am I going to do? What am I going to create? I just need to create something. Like, it was just like kind of like rushing through me. Like, I just needed to do something. I was like, and every day would be different. I'm like, I'll write a book of poetry. I'm going to publish a book of poetry. And the next day it would be like, I'm going to create a youth program that works with kids in inner cities to do like, to play basketball, you know, whatever. And they'd be all very different. And I remember like watching a lot of videos of Kanye West and like seeing his like entrepreneurial drive and like all that and being really inspired. And then like me and my roommate would have these crazy feeling manic moments where we were just like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? What are we going to create? And it was just so much. And then one day it all just was like, and this is the story I tell, is like everything just fell out of me. It was like just unloading all of this like shit out of my mouth. Was like, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through. It was like all this vulnerability and all this honesty that I wasn't connecting with my roommate over. And we like actually felt a connection. It wasn't oversharing, it wasn't overloading, it wasn't gaslighting, as Brene Brown puts it, but it was like truly being vulnerable and connecting. And then that connected with my creative impulse. And it was like, oh shit, let's create a community where we can do this. And at this point, I still would not have the courage to say I was a creative, but I did start a community at that point where people talked.
Man, that is deep. I couldn't, I was holding my breath. I was like, all right, let me get all this in, because I feel like you've been through a lot and it looks like in a short span of time, like things happening with mom, not knowing what you want to do, having to deal with work. And like I heard in another podcast, like using alcohol as a way of coping. It's like, all right, I need courage to do this thing and everybody around me is doing it, so I'll just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I'm hoping to achieve with this podcast, which is the reason why I was talking with Queenie today, she was asking me, like, oh, why didn't you talk to this particular people about the podcast? Or why are you talking with these people about the podcast? And I was like, I feel like a lot of creativity comes from a place of pain. Like that's a general narrative. It's like you have to be an addict or an alcoholic or lose someone. Like to create, you need to have pain. And I don't want to believe that it's true.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about that, because from what you're saying, the pain that you had wasn't necessarily coming from a place of I want to create. It was like, it was the reverse. So because you wanted to create, then other things, not even creativity, pain came around, like things happening to people you care about and just the desire to have purpose and a mission in life. Do you think it's possible to have, or that it could have been possible for you to get to this creative conclusion? Like, let me make this community, let me do this, without the pain that you had?
No. But I don't think that means creativity comes from pain. So do you want me to respond to both of those things?
Yeah, sure.
I would say the creative drive for me started from a deep place. Like the creative drive was always there, and it was parallel processing to the pain. The pain just happened to be a good inspiration for the creativity. And this is happening, I think, one of my friends who's a good musician, who I won't name because I don't want to speak for them. But I think when I was creating from a place of pain, it wasn't selfish, but it was feeling selfish. Like I remember telling my friend while Soul Stories was starting to like bubble up for the first time, probably like 4 years ago. I remember me and her were like going to like lay down and cuddle or something, and I was just like, I'm the only reason I'm doing this is for peace of mind. And it was like, me looking back at that was like, I thought at one point Soul Stories was going to save me, which I think some people might think that about creativity. And what I think is most problematic about that is it's limiting. I think creating from pain can be very productive and inspiring, but I think it can get you stuck in a loop. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Do you have any like vivid memory of how you experience this kind of what you're talking about, like how creating from pain can get you stuck? Did you have any, maybe an event or a piece of poetry or something that you were trying to create and you found that it was because of the pain that it didn't go through?
Yeah, I think it was the people I was attracting. I think energies attract energies. And when I was creating Soul Stories at the beginning, it was like I would for a 2-hour event, I would sit in my apartment by myself for hours and hours and like be writing these lyrics from songs and like exploring every way to facilitate the experience. And I would be overthinking and and like miserable, and like, but I would create something really beautiful. And that kept happening, right? Like I kept creating something beautiful every event. And then the people I was working with, I think, were also coming from a deep place of pain as well. And it led to conflict. It led to my ego getting in the way. It led to me being so attached to this product that I was like afraid to let go of control, because if it was saving me and people were taking control of it, then they were taking away part of me. I was so deeply entrenched in my own creative process. And so then to answer your question, like, I don't think Soul Stories could have expanded past bi-weekly groups. Like, it was the same bi-weekly meeting, because it was like almost like a process therapy group, right? And after I went through like a few years of like on and off healing and a lot of tumultuous experiences where I feel that I'm not healed, but I feel like I'm on the other side of pain. Like I'm creating from a place of joy. And now when I'm creating from a place of joy, like I'm actually not the one creating anymore, which is interesting. I'm the one creating the space. Like before I was creating everything, and now I'm creating the space and people are coming in. And now that I'm detached from it, it is its own thing. Because I think the creative process with Soul Stories isn't me. It is its own entity. It exists in the ether. It's a spiritual thing to me. It exists outside of me. And when I'm holding it and coddling it, it's not expanding. But when I'm its guide, then other people can guide it too. And so now we're creating like community projects. Like Unpacked, a creative dialogue and consent, which you referenced, was Hannah's leading. And where she was coming from, maybe a place of pain. I'm not sure if I could really speak to that, but like I was able to help guide that process for her to lead and use all of my experience. And then we created this fucking huge event with 9 incredible artistic performers where everybody felt like they were co-creating together. And it was a experience that could be shared rather than an experience that like I was sharing just from myself. We were all taking pieces of the pie. It wasn't my pie to give to other people, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the room and I experienced it. Like every single person who came up was unique, had a story that really hit hard. Like on the drive back after the event, I was telling you, like, everybody, including you who shared your story, had a moment of truth where I was like, oh, this is funny. And then the truth just hits you like, oh, wait, they didn't just say that. Like, yeah, it was, every story had a moment where I feel like every single person in the audience was faced with the truth, either personally or at a higher level where it's like, oh shit, this is real. Like this because I remember Hannah saying very specifically that she wanted real stories, like no fiction. Like it's a place for fiction, it's a place for poetry, but she wanted stories from people who actually experience them. Like that's
right.
What made it so different. It's like these are real stories, and
right, it's not a metaphor.
Exactly, which makes it. When I was sitting there, I was wondering the whole time, like, could I take this to Cameroon? Like, imagine people sharing their stories in an honest, vulnerable, consensual environment. And one thing that I was thinking about ever since the event actually was, now that we've talked about soul stories, and it seems like if anybody's listening, you think that that's all you do. Like, you only do soul stories and that's your whole life, which is...
I wish.
Which is like, because soul stories is like, it's your love. It is a spiritual creation that doesn't exactly bring in any money.
No,
Like,
it hasn't ever.
It hasn't. And you have a full-time job working in a traumatic environment. That's how I actually call it. Like,
it is a traumatic
it's
environment.
like Die Hard, the psychological version of Die Hard on a daily basis. So, how are you able...
I'm gonna tell my coworkers.
How are you able to do both? Because sometimes I feel personally that I can't have a life, like have a job and then create. But you are able to do soul stories on the side, which is not really on the side. It's like side by side. It's not a side hustle. It's like a full-time 2x full time.
Yeah.
How are you able to run Soul Stories? I mean, you already gave part of the answer, which is it's not just about you anymore. Like you create a space and then other people run it. Like Hannah unpack the dialogue on
Creative consent.
on creative consent.
Or creative dialogue on consent.
Yes. So how are you now able to do both of these things? You're creating from a place of joy, creating these community events, and having a job that takes so much. First of all, start by describing your job and then how it ties in with everything else.
Yeah. So I work with kids who've been through trauma and abuse at the Denver Children's Home. And yeah, they live there. They go there to get therapy. They go there to get treatment. And I'm responsible for helping calm them down in moments of crisis and supervise the counselors who directly work with them. And then what was the second question?
The second question was, how are you able to do such a stress intense job and have space for community involvement in form of Soul Stories?
Yeah. That's a really good question because I've been doing them side by side for many years now. And for the last 3 years, I was in a place of waves. So Soul Stories would go up. I'd be so on a high about it, and then it would drop deep into a low, and I'd be like, is this even making an impact? Does this matter? Like, I'm going to quit. I almost quit 3 times. I actually quit once. I quit for 6 months. Like, it didn't feel right. And then honestly, after I was able to receive healing, or during I was receiving a really cool form of therapy, I started to really be like, whoa, what am I doing? Like I was tested, I failed. I was tested again, I failed. I was succeeded really early, and then there were a couple tumultuous years, so I don't want to make it sound too romantic. It was pretty rough patch all the way through. And then it wasn't till this last year where do you want to hear a story?
Yeah, sure.
So my therapist, Jenny, does this experimental form of therapy alongside a tested form of therapy called muscle testing, if anyone's ever heard of that. And so this form of therapy was discovered by this guy, David. And so I was going through healing for relationships. And Jenny was like, do you want to go through healing for a career? And at this point I was like, yeah, I'm doing Soul Stories, but I don't know if I really want to do this or not. I thought I might have to give it up to become a therapist. And so we start to do this healing on career. We go through this process, and towards the end of it, she goes, David does this thing, and it sounds crazy as hell, but he does this thing where he tells people your calling. And so what he does is he listens to you, and based on what you talk about, he will tell you if you're speaking from your truth. And so he's done this for 50 people, and most people afterwards go, well, fuck you, David, you don't tell me what I want. And then they left. So he stopped doing it because he's like, look guys, I don't care. This isn't about me. I found this is a cool skill I have. I will help you for free. And if you're going to provide so much resistance, I'm just going to continue to do my regular work. It's just a fun extra thing. And so then my friend Jackson does it, and David tells him this. He breaks down crying. Within months, Jackson was very involved with Stained. Jackson applies to get his master's. He was completely lost when I first met him. Applies to get his master's, gets in, moves to a different state. And after he moves to a different state, he meets a girlfriend he's in love with. He from David's session, he's on this track. So I'm talking to Chelsea. Jenny offers this thing with David, and I'm just yeah, why not? What's the worst that can happen? He tells me something I don't want to do, and I don't do it. You know what I mean? So do you want to hear the process of this?
Yes.
So I sit down over Skype with David, and Jenny had told me, she goes, it's usually the thing that you're hiding from yourself.
Who's Jenny?
Jenny's my therapist.
Okay.
She tells me, like, your calling is usually the thing you're hiding from yourself that you don't want to admit. And so I was like, oh, well, it's definitely not soul stories. It's being a therapist. That's what I've always wanted to do, et cetera, et cetera. So David sits down with me and he goes, okay, so Danny, what do you want to do? And I go, I want to be a therapist. He goes, no. And I'm just like, the fuck? Okay. And then I'm like, to be a facilitator? He goes, no. And I'm like, to be an entrepreneur? And he goes, okay. And what does being an entrepreneur mean to you? And I was like, and this is going to be embarrassing to say on a podcast as much as it's going to be embarrassing to say to David, but I was like, I want to create something the world has never seen before. And he goes, okay, what do you want to create? And I was like, and then it just like kind of popped out of my head and I was just like, a way to be seen. And he goes, okay, that's it. And I'm like, what? Like, it was literally that long, Kamga. It was like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And I was like, what? And he's like, your calling is to create a way for people to be seen. And
David got that from a single conversation.
I mean, a 3-minute conversation. And my heart just like stopped and I was just like, fucking soul stories. That's what I've been doing the whole time. And so say what you want about that process with David, criticize it all you want, but like that validation, that somebody feeding that confidence back to me was just like, what am I doing? I've had this thing in front of me this whole time. I need to go 100%. Like 100 so hard that I'm not thinking about anything else, and that no matter what my day job feels like, no matter how hard it feels, that like I know this is what I want. And then it goes back to those stories you hear from the people who really like do the thing people thought they couldn't do, which is like making those sacrifices. So now doing this day job that is somewhat emotionally taxing isn't that bad, because I know at the end of the day I'm going to go home, I'm going to work out, I'm going to eat, and I'm going to spend the rest of the night or a couple hours or 3 hours or 1 hour on soul stories. And I'm going to spend my weekend on it because it fills me up. And I know I'm so focused on my vision that, and I think that takes practice. I think you just have to learn to focus on the vision. But I just feel so strongly about it. It's like nothing can get in my way at this point.
Wow. That sounds like there's so many nuggets I like to really dissect in there, because there's support from people that really believe in you, or people who you just met, like mentorship. I feel
like the mentor in the hero's journey.
Yeah, the hero's journey. Like David just showed. I was like, nope, okay, okay, yeah, do that. It's like I feel like on this journey, because I mean, on the Soul Stories podcast, we talk about my own creative journey, and
yeah,
even now I'm still finding a way to consolidate it. And I feel like we are always on a journey. It's like till death, we are going up, down, left, right. We're still figuring out a bunch of things. And in the creative journey, I feel like a lot of what allows people to create is love, even if they don't know it. In the form of, like in David's case, could be mentorship. Jenny proposing, like, let's try this out. That's somebody who cares about you. And what I want to find out is, apart from this, people who were, I don't want to say paid to help you, because it sounds like they were not exactly helping. How much support have you received on your journey as a creative that you felt, if I didn't get this person, maybe things wouldn't have worked out the way I wanted?
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I could spend the next hour
Let's go on.
off
Yeah,
the
I think
names.
we always think that we can care about ourselves. There's so many people behind this whole journey.
Yeah, no, there really is. I mean, I could talk about Chelsea, my roommate, and the nights that I come home doubting and feeling afraid and not wanting to do the thing, and her just like being like mirroring things back and working me through things, like you working on the podcast, you and Queenie, just your friendship, people who show up to events and clap and support, people who tell you how cool the thing you are is doing, people who tell you how it impacted them, people who are just your like. I mean, it's just like hundreds. It's hundreds.
What
It's
about your
from-
family?
It's my dad, who is a conservative Catholic businessman, telling me, wow, it's like, this is so cool what you found, Danny. Sending me things not really related to soul stories, but thinking they are, because it's like a parent trying.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's like, look at this storytelling thing. It seems like it's helping this person. Like, it's those, like, it's everyone giving you, people giving me permission has been a really big deal for me.
Okay.
I struggle with giving myself permission.
Same here.
Yeah.
It's something that Queenie always tends to remind me. It's like I for a long time I went through this period, and even now where I still feel like I need validation for my ideas, and I have to sometimes build my case for myself to believe it. It's like I need to find what's wrong, what I'm saying, so that I can believe it before somebody else pokes holes in it.
Right.
It's like, yeah, that's a pretty interesting position to be. I think there's a lot of vulnerability involved in creation to the point where it's difficult to take feedback. So I don't know how do you handle negative feedback in your creative process?
It depends on the day.
What does a good day look like?
A good day is when I know it's not about me. And like, I'd say at this point most days are like that, but there's some rough days.
Yeah. Tell me about the rough days.
I think the roughest time to get feedback, and it's like when people see a movie and I do this because I love movies,
Mm-hmm.
and right after a movie they tell you everything that was wrong with the movie, or they tell you like the things they loved, and then they tell you the things that was wrong with the movie. People witnessing what was created. What was created is always way less than what it took to create it, And so right after an event, when people come up to me, if people come up to me like, well, I don't think you should have done that. Or, it's like something like that's like, oh my God, my nervous system's on fire because I'm so vulnerable and I feel so like exhausted. I don't want to hear your feedback right now. And I just but I fake it, I fake it at that point.
What about during the process itself? Like not at the end of it. Like when you write, do you get editors, somebody to read, anybody to proofread or something like that?
Yeah. And I think getting feedback is a process. It's just learning what feedback is like. Cause I remember at the Unpacked event, I wrote a story. I told a story, and the first time I wrote it, I wrote most of it exactly how you heard it, and I said it after I asked for feedback from two of the members of First Sunday's team after a board meeting. Not a good time to do that. We've just been talking about soul stories for 2 hours. They don't want to give feedback, so they give feedback that I think is just like a little bogus. And because I've received so much critical feedback and gone through the process of like changing and shifting the boat so much, when I realize it's everybody's projection, like feedback is just people's projection, and you have to know when to get it, how to get it, and who to get it from. And after I got that feedback, I was just like, oh, that's not the feedback I want. That doesn't feel true to what I'm actually asking. Like, they're being overly critical right now. So then I read that exact same thing in front of 7 people who were also telling stories, and they loved every part of it, and then gave me feedback on like 5 or 6 parts that were like really specific, and I was like, that's the feedback I want. And then I reread it to those same people, and they loved it, So it's like, also it's like a tricky process.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, a lot of times what I used to do in the past is actually not all the things I write I ask for feedback on. It's like like on the times when I write on Medium, like every single day, so I'll just publish. My feedback will be just that people read and clapped. But there are specific pieces I've written. Like I wrote a piece on death after a couple of friends had died. Like it was this whole sadness I was feeling, and I really wanted feedback on that piece. Send it out to a couple of friends, and it took me like 2 months to publish that piece. Like I feel like there's some things that I create where I hold them closer to my heart than other things. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. Does that happen to you?
Yeah, totally.
What was the last thing you made that you felt, this is mine and I really don't want anybody to say anything bad about it?
That story.
Oh.
Yeah, because it was just like, it was about my process of letting go of Catholicism to be able to like enjoy sexual experience and have consensual experience.
Yeah. I really look forward to listening to it again. I was recording all of it and it was dope.
Yeah, I felt really good about it.
Yeah, I think, and then the whole part of people laughing, like the key parts are like, "What? This is cool." I mean, there were some points where you actually had to pause because the audience was laughing, and you had to wait for them to be done with it.
I honestly, like, they were laughing at parts I didn't write to be funny, and I was like, "This is ridiculous right now. What is happening?"
Oh man, so I'm doing the thing. I keep editing all day, and I hear and now I'm doing In your creative journey, what are some of the things that that people hold as truths that now you've seen as no, that's not? Like, what are some of those things that people say over and over, and you're kind of like, actually, that's not true. That's not my experience. Like some broad strokes things about creativity that before you took it, as part of your personality, everybody around you said it, but now when you look at it, you don't think it's true at all.
Give me an example.
Say, imagine, for example, that people say you have to create a routine around writing. Like, you need to wake up in the morning, set a time and write. Like, that's like a thing that creatives do. But you have discovered, well, that doesn't work for me, and that's not really true. So, like, some things in the creative industry that everybody says that you don't believe. It's true.
Yeah. Well, I think that is probably the most common thing anybody says to anybody ever. One thing I feel like, to that point, I think that's a good point to speak about, is that discipline is not the military. Discipline is like having a routine, showing up for it, and making sure you work at specific times, like they're saying with writing. And I think that has been very true for me. But like, discipline also is when you need rest, take rest. And when you finish a big project, giving yourself a week to work a little less than you did that week before. And when things are really hitting deadlines, to work harder then, and like having some adaptability in that discipline, I think is, I don't think people talk about the importance of rest when they talk about the creative process.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of accountability and self-care.
Yeah, self-care is way more important than people talk about.
Okay. When was the last time you experienced any form of burnout?
I think this winter, when I was doing podcast interviews with you, I was doing liminal interviews.
Yeah.
I was actually unpacked interviews we're having at the same time, and I couldn't even go to those. We were preparing unpacked. We were preparing liminal. We were preparing for Sundays. We were preparing the podcast. Yeah. But now I know what burnout feels like. So burnout happens in chunks. And I know that if I give myself like a weekend of pure relaxation and play, then I'm back Monday.
Cool.
So it's not as bad as it used to be.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some play right now. I feel like I owe it to you to really bring up one of your favorite movies that you recommended I watch. And I want to find out from you, like, favorite scenes or breakdown of what you loved about the movie making process. I think that almost every creative feeds from other creative work. I don't know whether that's the case with you. It's like, for me, the more I read, the better I write. And movies tend to inspire poems or music. Like, one thing inspires the other thing. So let's talk about Your Name.
Yes. Let's talk about Your Name. Tell us about Your Name, Kamga.
Yeah, I think I watched Your Name. And
what is Your Name?
Your Name is it's an anime movie by, I don't know his name.
I don't know him either.
Yeah. I think we'll have to Google his name at some point. I might add it in the description. I don't know. But it's a movie about two lovers whose bodies, whose souls are literally switched in their bodies. And
yeah,
I think if
Freaky Friday at its basic.
Yeah, but I mean, Freaky Friday is just an insult to your name.
Right.
But
100%.
I don't actually want to give a spoiler because I feel like there's one sentence that just destroys everything else.
I almost was going to do it, so thank you.
Yeah, I think you should watch Your Name first. But what I want to know, apart from it's not really about the movie itself, is what in that movie stood out for you? Like, what was the overarching theme? I know it's love. Yes, was it the characterization? What is the dialogue? Was it the story? What hit your face to the point where it became your favorite movie? Like, how do you get this movie to become your favorite movie?
Well, I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie.
Oh, it isn't?
No.
Okay.
But I would say it's in there.
I didn't know Danny that
it's
well.
It's in the top 5 or 10.
Okay. Well, that's good enough.
I would say Spirited Away might be my number 1 of all time. Did you watch that yet?
I watched Spirited Away, and I watched some reviews, and it got me thinking about some things. I don't know if I really want to talk about that right now, but anyway.
Yeah, you'll hurt my heart with your criticism over there.
Anyway, yeah. So
Your Name.
Yeah, Your Name. And any other movie that you want, because I want to really talk about what feeds your creativity. I don't know. Did Your Name in any way inspire any work for you?
Your Name didn't inspire work for me. Your Name was a really spiritual experience for me, though. That really reinvigorated my sense of spirituality for me.
How so?
There's this moment where they talk about like the spirits coming out at sunset, and that is a thing I have there's always this thing about sunset, and it's more noticeable in the summer, but at sunset my body, and when I was most anxious and depressed in my life, sunset was the only time where I felt relief from that. And that right there was like, whoa, that just feels like a truth when they talked about the spirits coming out in sunset. So now I really do believe that there's a spiritual experience for myself that happens at sunset where I'm just calm. I've reached that peace for a moment.
Wow.
And that has been the biggest takeaway for me. Oh, I mean, we could talk about the story and the animation and everything because it's a beautiful movie.
I agree. I just wanted to point that out there. If you've not watched Spirited Away or Your Name, you need to watch it. I just really had to point it out because I think it's such an amazing experience. I didn't watch it with Queenie. I was like, I need to watch this movie by myself because I don't want to share my tears. I cried in so many parts in the movie. I just couldn't. I couldn't have anybody in there with me at a particular moment.
It's a beautiful movie.
Yeah. I think what other works feed your writing or your creativity in terms of maybe books, music? Do you write with music? Do you create with I know you listen to a lot of hip hop.
I listen to a lot of hip hop.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of folk. Yes, music and movies are my 2 inspirations for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can dive deeper into that.
Yes, please.
So first I'll start with Spirited Away and what that actually has inspired my creative process, because I don't know if it's true or not, but this is what I heard, and I've been taking this as truth, that Hayao Miyazaki created Spirited Away scene by scene. He created I forget her real name, but she's Sen when she loses her name. Scene by scene, those decisions she made were the next scene hadn't been created yet. She made an organic decision, and that organic decision drove the plot. And so nothing was decided until the end, from what I heard. And so that has always been my process with everything I do, is a really organic start to finish. And I think that's why Liminal and Unpacked are seemingly similar and in execution incredibly different, because every little decision is made for the integrity of that event. At no point does it feel like a factory process to me. Yeah.
When you put it that way, I can actually see both, because I was one of the liminal storytellers, which is another incredible miracle that happened because we met. And I want to say it's funny. We were on stage, 8 storytellers. Was it 7? 8 for liminal. I think it was 8. For Unpacked, there were
10.
3, then 4. So 3, then 4.
Yeah.
That was 10. And there was a stage, there was an audience, and each person was one person on stage, but
everyone
single
was told to tell a true story.
Yeah,
true personal story.
exactly. And every single event was different from the other one. I couldn't even compare them. It's like two people wearing clothes. You can't say we're similar because we're wearing clothes, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it's like we're storytellers. Yeah, we're on a stage. Yeah, there's an audience, but it's a different experience. And I wonder what it takes to create such an experience.
Hannah had the vision, right? Hannah had the vision. She said, I want to have storytellers on stage with interactive performance element, and I want people to bring art into it. Liminal was true personal stories on stage for a certain amount of time. So that little bit of difference when we first put it on was like me and Delia were even talking about like what's really the difference. You know, there's like some interaction, there's some more art. We thought we were just gonna have some poetry or music. But then like as we have these 2 and 3 hour conversations over and over and over again that are involved with conflict, we're like, well, this is what I was envisioning, but this, and when you do that back and forth, you just build. You're just building. You're going up and up and up and up, and you end up creating something so much. It's like my goal is always the sum is much greater than the parts. You know, you go to Mercury Cafe in the Denver, they have some shitty parts. They have like this air conditioner that's always playing behind stories. They have like the seating's kind of weak, the food is kind of gross. But the sum of that space is like this gorgeous creative energy, and the parts don't add up, you know? And I think that happens when you put thought into every single aspect of what you're trying to create.
Oh, that is some masterclass right there, Danny. You should start a school or something.
No.
A school of creativity, a school of hard creativity.
Yeah, it was definitely hard. Definitely not a masterclass. Take that off the podcast.
If there was a way for you, actually, forget about the way, like younger listeners, right? People who might think that they don't have a creative bone, or who might be thinking, you know, just juggling with the idea of creativity, who don't have access to Jenny or David, or like the kind of people that you've been able to be lucky and blessed to have around you. What would you, if you had to be like their auditory mentor for these next couple of moments, what would you tell them?
I would say just do the thing. Do the thing that you're thinking about. Does that make sense?
And I mean, it sounds like be yourself. It sounds like, you know, have faith. You know, it's
like not even that. Like literally just do that thing.
Okay, if they tell you, well, I want to write a book, so
start writing. If you hate it, throw it away. Okay, I don't like this book. If you want to write a poem, write a poem. Okay, I hate it. You know, do the thing until that thing feels right. Don't do the thing till the thing looks right or is successful compared to your favorite people, but do the thing till it feels right.
Okay. Well,
like for me, I like to draw and I like to write poetry.
No, I didn't know you like to draw.
Yeah, but I don't share that. I don't consider that a thing I want to do for the world. But I know I love event hosting. I know I love bringing people together. I know I love listening to art and creating space. And I want to do that in the world. And that feels right to do that in the world. But it doesn't feel right to draw in the world, you know? So I won't do that.
Okay. Have you ever had to give up something? I mean, any projects you've had to put a lid on and actually say, you know what, I could do this, but I'm not going to do it?
Not creatively. I think traveling has been something I've had to sacrifice.
Tell me about that.
I have a lot of friends who have traveled all over the world.
But you did travel. I mean, on Chelsea's, when I was listening to Chelsea's, I was editing and listening. You and Chelsea probably met during the Brazil. What was it again?
So I went to Brazil for a program to work with youth for 2 summers in a row.
Okay.
But I mean, my friends have traveled to 29 countries. You know, like Chelsea's traveled to 29 countries. I have friends who have been all over the world. Brett travels. One of my best friends, Brett Randall, a musician and writer in Denver, he travels 3 to 4 months a summer. So I've witnessed my friends like run laps and circles around me in traveling, and part of my heart like aches a little bit and go, oh, that's what I want. But I was just talking to my good friend Kate about this actually, and she was like, she's now doing that. Like she told me, she's like, I really want to create something like you're doing, Danny. But right now it just feels right for me to travel to the Northwest. She wants to travel to the Northwest and then to Japan. She wants to like really just engage in this thing. And she's like, and I was telling her, I was like, it makes me a little jealous. Like I almost wish I could go on that adventure.
Yeah.
Like you could. But in my commitment to creating an organization, I can't at this point. I am going to travel, but I'm not like this year. I'm going to travel a couple times, but not to the extent not to that adventure that I really want eventually. And so we kind of were like, maybe we're just on these parallel processes where like eventually she'll settle down, create something. And eventually once Soul Stories has legs, then I'll go on like a 9-month adventure,
Yeah, I mean, it almost got me thinking about this book I was reading called The Subtle Act of Not Giving a Fuck that Femi recommended I read. And I'm not done reading the book yet, but I was thinking about the overarching message of the book is really about the fact that we need to embrace suffering. And when I think of suffering, the way I look at life and joy is like life is basically overcoming suffering to get joy. And so when you talk about, oh, hey, I want this thing that you already have, but it looks like you want this thing that I have. It's like we are always having to overcome something to get what we want. And it's like a constant cycle of going through the motions of sacrificing things. I don't know. Is it sacrifice? Is it compromise?
Negotiating.
Negotiating like, all right now I can't do this thing, but I can do this thing. And it's like being in a relationship. When you're single, you're, oh, I wish I was in a relationship. But then when you're in a relationship, you're like, oh, I wish I was single. It's like, It's like this thing of, all right, what do I really want right now? And what am I willing to give up or offer to get what I want? And
I think the thing, if you don't mind that I interrupt.
No, it's okay.
And in that is, and I think the hardest part about creating something in that is like, it's like when you're in a relationship, you always want to be single. When you're single, when you're writing something, you always wish it was a little better. When you're creating something, you always wish it was a little better. You always wish this, this, and this. And I think you can't really create until you accept that that's always going to be the case.
Yeah.
Yep. A musician just said that I was listening to a thing is like, the song I hear in my head is never the song I play. It's always better in my head than what I play. And that was really interesting to hear.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I don't know if you've watched a TED Talk by Elizabeth Gilbert, something about a creative genius. I've forgotten. It is this really powerful TED Talk. She basically talks about creativity and the whole idea of a genius and how much pressure the world has put on one person making this work of art, and then the whole world judging them on this one piece of art.
Because she wrote Eat, Love, Pray.
Yeah. And then people are like, oh, can you believe that your best work is actually behind you now? Like, imagine, like, you're done. You would never write anything that surpasses this book or this piece of art. Or imagine you make an event and then somebody tells you, like, I don't think you ever do anything that beats that.
I actually am afraid of that. I haven't really come to terms with that thought.
Yeah, and in the TED Talk, she actually breaks down like the whole idea of how the word genius evolved, where it left from people realizing that, the muse and genius was something that comes to you. Like, you have genius, you aren't. You can have a moment of inspiration where you connect deeply and you create this work of art, but you are not that moment. Like, you are not a genius. You're just a vessel. You're inspired.
For the genius to come through.
Exactly. Like, I don't know who gave the quote, something about inspiration comes in the morning or afternoon, but it always meets you at work. Like, it should meet you basically sitting down and ready. Like, you don't have to wait for inspiration to do what you do, which is a lot of what I need to understand myself, because as a creative, I feel like sometimes I want to be inspired before I do anything. Like, I'm going through this slump and I'm like, oh, I need to wait for the right words, the right moment, like, the song in my head to show up.
Yeah.
But sometimes you just need to write a song and then, fix it, or it sucks and then you write another one.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, are there any songs in your mind that you're thinking of forward? Like, when I say song, I mean like projects. Soul Story is taking such a huge part of your life. I'm wondering if you have other things that you're working on that are not Soul Stories but still creative.
No, not really.
Okay.
I got invited to be to help throw a fake wedding. That is supposed to be this.
How does that happen?
It's like a performance.
Okay.
It's like it's gonna be like a theater piece.
Was it Chelsea?
No, it's my friend Will. But actually, I'm kind of excited to break into that world a little bit, because I think I don't have a ton of creativity. I would I would say, but something that I'm really good at is being with a partner and riffing. Like, I'm not really a creative isolationist. I'm really like a partner collaborator, and riffing for really cool ideas on how to create these experiences for people. So I'm actually really excited to get invited by some influencers in Denver to start creating cool events alongside them. Because one of my biggest inspirations, Bon Iver. Do you know Bon Iver?
No, who's that?
He is I don't know if you describe him as a folk artist, but he's like a folk artist in America.
Oh, I think I used to pronounce the name as Bon Iver.
Bon Iver, yes.
Okay.
And well, I think it's French. Don't you speak French?
I speak French, but I have no clue. Like, I don't know who it is.
Good.
Yeah,
good
I've seen it.
Bon Iver.
I've seen. Oh yeah, Bon Iver. Yes, it's Bon Iver. Yes.
Yeah. So Justin Vernon, the man behind Bon Iver, is in like 7 different bands, and he's always creating with other people, and you can always see how his own personal work just levels up because he is always working with others, and that's a big inspiration of mine, and also why everything at Soul Stories is co-created, because I think if it was just coming from me, it would be limited as fuck. Sometimes I feel like that well ran dry a few years ago.
About the well, I feel like, I've gone through these periods of intense creativity and then having nothing to create, and it goes back to the beginning, what you said about discipline, which is not military. It's like a routine, and you can't give what you don't have. I feel it's like you can only dissect what you collect, like in the whole world. Like you don't have to read or watch movies, but when you look at the world with creativity, when you look at the world with curiosity, not creativity, it's like almost every single conversation can become a source of a project.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel so when you say the world has run dry, it's one of those things that people easily, and I mean not you, because you're already doing what you're doing. People always easily use it as an excuse. It's like, I'm waiting for inspiration. I don't have anything, or I've written this one thing. Like I had this friend, thank you for reminding me, who wrote a piece, and she was trying to get me to read this piece by all costs. It was like one thing she wrote down 4 months ago on Medium, and she pointed out to me that, have you read my piece? I was like, nope. And she asked me why, because she reads my work and she always comments and everything, and I felt terrible. I was like, this supporter is doing all this thing and I'm not reaching out. Like, why is this working out? But then I realized that the reason why I didn't read it was because there wasn't enough to measure with. It's like, you've written one piece, and what do I compare that with? I can't see your progress. I can't see anything else. There's nothing else. It's like, I don't have the impulse to actually check it out because there's not much to deal with. And I don't know if that's an excuse that we give ourselves, waiting for inspiration, waiting for the right moment.
Yeah.
How does that, do you ever find yourself in a position where you feel like you need to wait for an answer or for the music in your head to play?
I used to. For many years, that's how I operated. And I think what shifted was my vision got bigger. And when my vision got bigger, I realized that there were a lot more tasks. And that's what I think the thing is about, like, if you really want to create for a career or even like an active side project, it's not just creating. It's networking, it's marketing, it's these menial logistical tasks and like these really annoying things you have to do.
Taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, taxes. It's like recording your hours. It's whatever you want. It's whatever like boosts. It's like whatever goes around. It's the garnishes to the entree, And so now that there's so much to be done that I don't have time to wait for the creative process, okay, tonight I gotta send this email, I gotta connect with this person, I gotta get this logo, I gotta collaborate with this person, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not even like thinking about what I just know that at this time this thing needs to get done. And so then I think when it's like I got to meet with Delia, we're planning now how to make Liminal an online platform, and that is a really creative space. And so the meeting was 2 days ago at 6:00 or whenever it was, and then inspiration showed up because that's what it was on my calendar.
You schedule inspiration.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's like the most honorable kind of way to create, where it's like, well, I got to do what I got to do. It is what it is.
Right.
It's
and if it doesn't work that time, it might work the next meeting.
Yeah, I feel like almost everybody has to go through this, either personally or learn from books, mentors, that you need to be able to create because it's something that you do, not because something that love is great.
Exactly.
Yeah. Love, inspiration, desire, emotions, they're great. Like, you can tap into that, but you have to do the work. Like Steven Pressfield says, I don't know if you've read Do the Work or Turning Pro. He's one of those writers who makes you realize that this whole journey of creativity, it's about, like writer's block.
Right.
People say they have writer's block, but why don't doctors have doctor's block? If you go to the hospital,
right.
and I'm sorry, I don't feel like I can prescribe today, just some other time.
Right.
And that's from Elizabeth
That's
Gilbert.
really good. Yeah.
So what I want to find out now is, you're in a relationship, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm dating.
Ooh.
I wouldn't. Don't get me too far on this.
Okay, cool. In your life as a creative work and everything, but tending towards creativity, how has creativity that helped or hurt your relationships?
Oh my God. Well, it has. I think what was different, I was living in a co-op last year, and I was always relationships first, and relationships are like my number one value. But I was so obsessed with tending to relationships that I was tending to a lot of relationships, and all the right ones and some ones that like were probably not the best fits for me. And then my creative process took a backseat, and I wasn't disciplined like I am now. Like, that speech I just gave sounds like I'm on a pedestal, but that's that's a really recent occurrence. And so when I moved out of the co-op so I could focus on soul stories. And once soul stories became my main focus, it actually allowed me to keep the right relationships around me. Like, I feel like now I'm with the people who are supportive of me, and I'm supportive of them, and like people aren't draining me, and I'm not like forcing myself to be friends or like seek validation. Now I feel like I'm in the circles that really fill me up, and the circles that challenge me, and I still have that sense of loyalty, because like, fuck off to anybody who says like, if it's not serving me, let it go.
Yeah.
Like there's loyalty. There's still a sense of loyalty. I could go on a rant about that. Anyways.
Okay. Well, I have 4 questions for rapid fire, which could probably seal into independent conversations of themselves, because
oh my God, I could talk to you forever about this. I think this is a great conversation.
Thanks.
Great concept for our podcast.
All right. So, first question is, when was the last time you experienced flow? You know what flow is?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're creative. You know what flow is.
Yeah. Sitting down with Delia to plan. The last time was just recording these intros with you to podcast. Felt like we were really in a good flow just an hour ago.
Okay. Cool. And when was the last time you cried?
Ooh. Last time I cried. Probably a month ago.
Really?
Yeah, I cry a lot after movies, and I watch a lot of movies.
Okay. So the last time you watched a movie was was a month ago?
No, a good, like one of those movies that makes you cry.
Yeah. I know what you mean.
Yeah.
If you had one movie to rewatch for the rest of your life, which movie would you choose?
Oh, I already said Spirited Away, so I'm not going to talk about that. I'll say Dazed and Confused.
I need to watch that now. Favorite fictional character?
Goku from Dragon Ball Z.
All right. And then now, my last and favorite question is favorite video game character.
Oh, on not the video game I've played the most, but favorite video game character would probably be Link from Legend of Zelda.
Okay.
Played it probably the least of any video game, but still my favorite character.
Yeah, I don't think I played much of Zelda. Like, I didn't. Yeah, I was more high-grade Sub McTavish of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, but it's cool.
Modern Warfare 2 is a great game.
Yeah, it is. Now, Danny, I feel like I've gone in so many different areas, and I tried as much as possible not to say things that people will listen to, because I feel like you talked a lot about yourself on Dave's podcast, you talked a lot about yourself, or a bunch of things on Mike's podcast, and who cares? And even on the Soul Stories, somehow your story still finds a way to come out. And I really just wanted to focus.
Make me sound like a narcissist.
It's you're talking, like you can't not talk about what is true to you. And this is moment for you to either say something that you feel I've missed on your journey. Probably a question I didn't ask about this, your creative path.
Something I've missed on.
No, have missed. Yeah,
something you missed on my journey.
Yeah, because I know that I'll put the links to actually your episodes, because I don't want this to be just a rehash of everybody or the other person's podcast. It's not.
Yeah, totally.
That's not my goal. Yeah.
Something you haven't heard.
Yeah.
Ooh, something you haven't.
That has been, impactful. Like I want to be able to listen to this and pick up nuggets. Like the things that you've said, like, just do it and find a way to collaborate and, be disciplined. It's not military. There's a bunch of nuggets that are spread out here that I really feel that can help somebody who's starting up on a creative journey. And I really want this to be somewhere that people can come and realize that being a creative doesn't have to be all pain and negativity and sacrificing your personal life, to build a creative. Like, you don't have to live on the streets.
Personal life. Yeah, I'm very, very happy with my personal life.
Yeah, I think that's the core message of the podcast. Like, can you be happy and creative and live a full, life?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel.
What's the secret, Danny?
The secret is. Actually, I was just thinking about this. I don't think this is something you haven't heard, but I think it's important. Whatever habits or thoughts or cycles are in your way for living life to the best expression of yourself, because we all know what holds us back. Deal with those first, because the creative process, your passion, your relationships, nothing is going to save you from that. That is a journey you have to find a way through and take responsibility for that, because nothing outside of yourself will get you past yourself. Only you can do that.
That is some Yoda stuff, Danny. Get past your journeys. You must. Find your truth. You have to.
Oh, man, you said it better than I do.
Thank you so much, Danny. I mean, I still look back to the day we met, and it's still a miracle to me. We'll have to move out of Pueblo, but I told you I'd have to return like at least twice a month for us to work on Soul Stories and other things. And I'll just like to say on the record here that I'm really grateful for the day we met at Open Mic. That was a really one-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us to click and then get all these things done. And ever since, it's been up from there. So thank you.
I've grown so much from being in a relationship with you, dude. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
All right. If there's anything else you want to say, this is it. Just, say it.
Kamga is the motherfucking man.
All right. Then, yeah, that was it. I mean, I'm going to record an outro. Don't worry about this. I'm the editor. I do things.
Yeah, that's not my job. I just say things and look pretty.
I'm keeping that. I am keeping that. Okay, thanks, Danny. Thank you for sticking with us till the very end of the episode. I'm sure you can hear how much fun we had on this particular one. Is almost every single time I spend time with Danny, it always ends up this way, making jokes, talking about movies and books and stuff, and things still come out, ideas on how to do better and projects. The whole Soul Stories podcast, how we ended up working, was really just because of how we connected. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, if there was a part of the episode that you liked or didn't like, I would love for you to leave a review on iTunes or SoundCloud or wherever you're listening to this, and share the episode with somebody. Maybe you have a brother, a sibling, a friend who wants to be a creative, who is wondering what it takes to be a creative. Just share this episode or any part of the episode that you thought you really enjoyed. I would really love to get your feedback so that I can improve and then find better guests. So I keep saying so. Have a great day, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this. I am your host, Kamga Tchassa, signing off until the next time we meet again on the podcast. So remember, the schedule for the podcast is Mondays and Thursdays. I'm still figuring out a time that works, but soon enough you'll have a very specific time you can get the episodes. But you can subscribe everywhere, and if you don't have this podcast on any of your preferred platforms, let me know and I will fix that. You have a great day. Remember, you are made to create, made to love, and made to thrive.